Friends, very happy to see you tonight. Well, I say night, it's nighttime here in Cape Town, South Africa, Monday, 30th of September or so. My computer screen tells me. Very happy today to be welcoming you to the 39th Lazarus Symposium. Can you believe it? Just early today, I was scratching my head and thinking about how many hundreds of hours have gone into these symposiums, but more than thousands of hours of broadcasting. But more than that, it occurred to me that we've done something quite pioneering, which is in the course of the last 3 years. I think it's, how many? It's 39 is like, yeah, around about 3 years. In the course of that time, myself and my producer, Christy, and some early team members as well who peeled off a while back. But we've managed, and of course our IT support with Eloy and Onyx and Joanne, Anna, all the people behind the curtain on our team. We've managed to harness some of the greatest minds on earth. And I'm desperately proud of that. I'm very, very proud of that piece. I was looking today, I was trying to find the little piece of media that I did with Jimmy Blanchette, as you know, who's coming on to today's panel. In fact, today's panel is largely focused around the breakthrough physics that Jimmy Blanchette is spearheading. And that's going to be challenged, endorsed, supported, and conversed and pulled apart by the very, very brilliant Charlie Ziese and David Sereda, who's well known and well beloved to you, my audience. But earlier today, I was looking to see if I could find a piece of media that we began with my first meeting with Jimmy Blanchette, when I heard from David Sereda saying, Sasha, this guy is contacting extraterrestrials. He's a brilliant scientist, and he's making first contact in a way that's never been done before. And if those of you who've been around long enough will remember, I made a mad dash to California to meet with Jimmy Blanchette. I went into his laboratory, and he codified a message from me to the ETs, to the star nations, so to speak. And using his incredible techniques, he managed to codify my message into my photograph of me and the message into numbers. And those numbers he then turned into a file and bounced that signal thing off the moon. He uses the moon, he harnesses the moon as a bounce pad to get his messages into deep space. And we did that. And then he said, come. And we hightailed it out into the desert in California, waiting for the signal to come back from the star nations, from the extraterrestrials. And it took us a few hours. He said, wait, it'll be on such and such a time. You know, we went up a mountain, and he laid out, I can't remember how many walkie-talkies on different channels. Well, sure enough, at the appointed hour, we look up, pitch black, middle of the night, and the lights appear in the sky above us. And we're in a particular part of the desert on hills where there was no interference, or very little interference with the Skynet. And so indeed, we saw it. We saw the twinkling lights above us, and we then received contact from the extraterrestrials, the Star Nation, the intelligences that Jimmy had bounced the message off the moon too. And that I witnessed. I was there. I witnessed it. It was extraordinary. And I'm going to catch up momentarily with Jimmy to find out in the last couple of years how that extraordinary experiment has evolved since that time. But let me just say, by way of introducing today's panel, we're talking about the mechanics of creation, the physics of revelation, because revelation is a great thing, but you know, the Hopi and the Cherokee and the Aboriginals are all variously connected to revelations, connected to their cultural mores and persuasions. All the First Nation indigenous people around the world, the oracles and the viziers and the medicine men and the shaman and the bone rattlers, are all variously keyed into revelation. And biblical prophecy, you know, hardcore fundamentalist Christians, hardcore fundamentalist Muslims, and all monotheistic religious persuasions are also variously keyed into their iteration, their interpretation, their expression of revelation. Okay? And then you've got the more mystical traditions of those monotheistic faiths, which is invariably the more truthful, the more integrated aspects of those faiths, like the people going back to the mystical traditions of Islam and to Buddhism and to Taoism and Confucianism, and even the Christians through the messaging of the Cathars and the Essenes and what have you. They also have a very, very key take on revelation. Great. So we're being informed by all of the primary cultural narratives and religious narratives about revelation. But for me and for you, which is my audience, the Lazarus audience, actually we'd like revelation to be broken down into hard physics, science, the mechanics of revelation, which is connected in to the mechanics of creation, because it's all a singularity. So today we're exploring how ancient civilizations may have understood and harnessed cosmic mechanics, specifically through the architectural wonders of, for instance, the Giza complex in Egypt, and with the Sphinx there. And we'll discuss the potential existence of so-called black holes and portals within ancient sites, and how this knowledge can reshape our understanding of both history and the cosmos. And my distinguished guests and panelists here are going to guide us through these topics, transforming highly complex theories into intriguing insights for the layman. That's you and me. So first off, I've got Jimmy Blanchette joining us again, the accomplished scientist and executive leader with over 25 years of experience in quality operations, research, and engineering, utilizing the first contact protocol. That's what Jimmy's work is essentially revolves around, the first contact protocol and contact with the universal intelligences, which led over the years to significant discoveries which may have a profound impact on our generic understanding of general relativity, physics, and the connection with the ancient sacred sites around the world. You can follow the links that are going out with this broadcast to chase down more of what Jimmy Blanchette is up to. I've also got Charlie Ziese with expertise, as you know, a much beloved figure on the Lazarus Initiative, the expertise in sacred geometry. And Charlie Ziese's investigations of mathematical intricacies woven into ancient monuments and so on have enchanted us in recent symposia. His research on the tetrahedron and golden ratio illuminates the sophisticated understanding ancient builders had of cosmic structures and energy harmonics. And again, you can chase more of Charlie's work by following the links, but don't miss going to stargatepyramids.com. Fantastic site. And finally, David Sereda, who may or may not be on time. I'm looking in the green room. No, he's not yet. He's having some issues getting online, but I dare say he will join us. David Sereda, our resident frequency and harmonics guru, the physicist and filmmaker. And David, of course, bridges ancient wisdom with quantum physics, offering innovative healing modalities and unique perspectives on the interconnectedness of the universe. That, my friends, is the place we call home. Let me bring on first Jimmy Blanchette. Jimmy, very happy to see you again after these years. How have you been?
I've been great, doing great here, Sasha. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Great seeing you again, really.
Very good. And Jimmy, stand by. I just want to bring Charlie in quickly. Charlie Z, so happy to see you again, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Now, that sounds like a hit record to me. Now, Jimmy, I know the audience are keen to know. You heard my clumsy preamble there talking about, early today I was looking for that piece of media, but that we have got so many thousands of hours of footage and of media. Honestly, I couldn't find it, and I'm not at home. I'm not at my normal studio. I'm abroad traveling, so forgive me. I got caught with my underpants around my ankles. I couldn't find that original film that we did where we made that contact with the ETs. But I'm turning to the audience here, guys. I'm going to re-release that as a standalone, and I'm going to do that on all social media platforms and through the Lazarus TV. So that you guys can catch up with, because that was such a fascinating introduction to Jimmy Blanchette's work. We don't have the time today to again enchant you about that extraordinary pioneering work he's doing in making first contact with ETs and in the way he does it. So I'll pledge to you that in the coming days, Christy, take a note, maybe within a week, maybe next weekend, we can just release the original Jimmy Blanchette files to remind those people who weren't part of Lazarus 2.5, 3 years ago, this extraordinary man's work. But Jimmy, just to recap, since we were making contact and bouncing messages off the moon, have you still, before we move on to today's subject, which is a different raft and a different narrative, are you still doing that same technique, or have you modified it? Are you still having success in making that kind of first contact?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, actually. And when we met in California, I was just a day away from moving to Arizona. So I moved to Arizona back in 2021, June 2021. And I'm near Sedona, not very far, maybe an hour drive south of Sedona. And so I moved all my equipment here, and I continued to work and it expanded it quite a bit. I do have 2 antenna systems now, one capable of broadcasting on 432 megahertz, which is capable of delivering 250,000 watts of radiated power. And the other one on 144.1 megahertz is capable of deploying about 150,000 watts of radiated power. So with that kind of power, we can reach all the corners of the solar system and far, far beyond, obviously, depending on what we target. And what happened, if I can summarize briefly, probably the main development since we met. In the early part of my work on this, I was really focused on contact work, obviously, right? And this has evolved tremendously, especially when I arrived here in Arizona. I set up cameras on my antenna system, which I had not done really extensively in the past. And I started having really visual manifestations which really contain information in mathematics. And I do have a lot of examples of that. I have the footage actually of these manifestations, which contains these harmonics of creation, harmonic 144, 432, the golden ratio, for instance, right? And when I started studying this, clearly there was information embedded, and I realized that this information was also encoded in the Great Pyramid of Giza, the same harmonics. And essentially, it's been encoded all over the world in these ancient sacred sites and also in other manifestation from non-human intelligences that other people have had, and also very famous one like the Rendlesham Forest enigma that probably most people know, which is probably the second biggest UFO incident in history, the Rendlesham Forest. That the binary code that was broadcasted or transmitted in that incident by this intelligence contains the very same harmonics and that same physics, essentially. So it really appears that for thousands of years, actually, this information about how the universe really works has been encoded in these manifestations from non-human intelligence and also in these ancient sacred sites that are all over the world. And it's really, that's how my work has evolved really into a very more deep mathematics and physics. And it's all beautiful because it's working out.
Right. And that, of course, is why we've got our resident genius, Charlie Ziese, on to throw some rocks possibly at the physics. Who better to do it? Charlie, before we run the piece of tape that we recorded with Jimmy a few days ago as a kind of introduction to this today's panel, just want to do a quick catch up with you, because I know the audience want to know also, what is your critical focus at the moment?
Well, I've been spending the last 6 months, as you know, I've been on with you showing that the golden ratio has shown up in architecture all over the world. But what I've spent the last 6 months working on is the field of fluid dynamics. Now, fluid dynamics is a subset of mechanical engineering, which deals with objects going through air or water mediums and so forth, and how those interact. Well, what I've found is that this process of golden ratio scaling is showing up in fluid dynamics. If you want to find out what the nose cone of a rocket ship should be, don't ask a mechanical engineer, because they don't know the answer. But I can tell you that it's golden ratio scaling because it shows up every single time. So that's what I've been working on. We'll be talking about that, I know, next month. But what it's proving to me is that, and I'm sure it will to the audience, is that literally this is embedded into the fabric of the ether. And so it's just another example of how we're proving indirectly the existence of the ether and the existence of the golden ratio within the ether. So
very good.
That's what I'm up to.
Have you met Jimmy Blanchette before? Forgive me, guys. I just don't know if you've been introduced.
No, just a few minutes ago.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, what David, of course, knows Jimmy very well, was the one who introduced me to Jimmy. So I think let's run this tape if that's good for you. Charlie, pay close attention because we're expecting you to pick some holes in this. I want a bun fight. I want a bun fight before the end of this panel, guys.
All righty.
Stand by. Stand by.
Today, we'll present slides and a short video to begin with, to demonstrate that the ancient civilizations have encoded very important information in the location of the ancient sacred sites, in the alignment, the constructions, and so on. And it's very profound information. It's all connected to quantum physics, literally. That's really that profound and that sophisticated. So today, we'll start up with a video that shows that most of the renowned ancient sacred sites are perfectly aligned like an equator around the Earth on a very specific line with a band of about 100 kilometers. This comprises obviously the Giza complex, which is also located on that line. After the video, I will show that when a few months ago, actually, I proposed a mechanism of universal creation to show how the source divided itself to create the material world we live in. And so we'll show that this mechanism, actually, the energies, the steps and the energies involved in that mechanism are actually encoded in the physical geographical location of the Giza pyramids in a very, very accurate way. So there's more information, so we'll cover that. So if you want to start maybe with the video that shows the ancient sacred site. All right.
Great stuff.
Excellent, excellent. So if you want to bring up the slides, Sasha, I can maybe get started on the presentation.
Let's hit it. Okay, here we go.
Oops.
And about, I will stick you in the hot seat. Give me one moment. There we go.
All right. So today, as I said, I will focus more on the Giza complex itself, where there's very profound information that's encoded. So we'll talk about the primordial fractalization and the mechanism of universal creation. So really what we see here, and I showed a little map of some of the key distances from the prime meridian and from the equator, and also from the intersection between, of the prime meridian and the equator to the Giza complex. The distances we see there are in nautical miles. And the reason why we use the nautical miles is the nautical miles is compatible with geometry. There are 21,600 nautical miles to circle the globe around the Earth. And there are 21,600 minutes of arc in the circle, right? So there's a one-to-one match. And that's why when we use the proper units, we see things in nature that are encoded that we will not see otherwise. So it's really critical. And also, and that's very recent, actually, Sasha, that is the first time I'm going to be presenting these results. The proposed mechanism of creation that I'm going to show in a few minutes also provides a direct solution to the makeup of our universe. This mystery about dark matter, dark energy, visible matter, and why they are there in the first place from a quantitative standpoint, but also, in terms of where they're really coming from, because our current science or mainstream science can only explain 5% of our universe, which is the visible matter, right? They're like 27% of dark matter and 69% of dark energy, and they do not know where that energy is coming from. And I was going to show that this energy comes from this primordial fractalization mechanism. So basic principle here, really nature operates, and that's the way that when I came up with this mechanism that, we have to assume that nature operates with simplicity and elegance, right? No complexity. Obviously, nature can create beautiful things that grow and fractally and become complex. But originally, we expect nature to be simple and elegant. That's really the path that I followed. And also it's based on fractals, right? The fractals really is a pattern that repeats forever, and every part of the fractal looks very similar to the whole image. So that's really what we see in nature. Fundamental principle, the first aspect of it is really, mathematically, we represent source creation or the unity or all that is, or some could think about the Big Bang, even the singularity of the Big Bang as being the number one, right? That's mathematically, we represent that by the number one. And we know that in nature, the one divides itself into the many, right? Creates everything on our universe. So the one is there in that equation. And then obviously, what is the most efficient division of principle that we see everywhere in nature really is the golden ratio, right? The golden ratio really creates all the proportions that repeats fractally. We see fractals all in nature, and also leads to recursive self-similar pattern. And so to me, that was the most logical division principle applied to source creation to create, the universe. So that phase one here that we see, actually, so we see that in that slide, we see the 1 over the golden ratio, and that actually the golden ratio, which is represented by the distance A here in the map. We can look on the map. So incredibly, the distance between the prime meridian and the Giza complex is exactly 1617.32 nautical miles. So really, we have a very nice match with the golden ratio principle, which is encoded in there, right, at 99.96%. Now, the next step, obviously, that energy that's created out of that primordial fractalization needs to go somewhere. And again, if we follow this principle of simplicity and elegance, what is the simplest three-dimensional structure that exists in the universe? It is the tetrahedron, right? So that energy is distributed essentially within the volume energy of a tetrahedron. I represented that fraction here by the harmonic 618 because obviously 1 over golden ratio is 0.618033 blah 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 with a bunch of decimals. To make it more visible for the audience, I called it harmonic 618. And we know in harmonic mathematics also the powers of tens are transparent. So that's the way I represented it here. So we'll go to the next step here. If we go a bit more granular, harmonic energy 618 divides itself within the tetrahedron. So we're not looking only at a tetrahedron. If we go a bit deeper, we're looking at the tetrahedron with an inscribed sphere. Right?
Yes.
And so if we mathematically, it's all mathematical. I do have these softwares to do this calculation. So the 618 divides itself into a volume energy inside that inscribed sphere, right? And that volume energy will be 1868. And the volume energy outside, the residual outside that sphere, will be equivalent to 431.2. And right away, we can see something that's really interesting, that these two figures are connected directly to harmonic 432, right? 431.2 is matches harmonic 432, and 1886.8 matches harmonic 432 squared from harmonic mathematics standpoint at 99.9% match. So that's interesting because we see that in nature, this famous harmonic 432 is everywhere, is encoded in the size of, the sun and the distance and everywhere. And from my research, my standpoint, the reason why harmonic 432 is everywhere in nature is that it really derives directly from this primordial fractalization mechanism. Another fact that's really interesting also is the side length of this tetrahedron is exactly equivalent to 2 times the Planck length. And that's not an accident. All that we're seeing is connected to actually quantum physics. Without going into any detail here, just want to mention that 2 times the Planck length is the threshold radius at which the Planck mass becomes a black hole, right? So it's not an accident. So if we see here, I represented what we just saw a bit more graphically, and we see this harmonics 432 and this harmonic 1868 in the inscribed sphere. Well, if we look at distance b now, distance b, which is the distance, the longitudinal distance from the prime meridian to the Giza complex, is exactly 1867.84 nautical miles, right? So if we round that figure, we get exactly this harmonic 1868 at a very high degree of accuracy, 99.97% match. So that's phase 2 that I call. I'll go to the next one. For those who followed the work of Nassim Haramein, who's done extensive work on the 64 tetrahedron grid, right? We know that the flower of life that we see in that little picture here, the flower of life really is a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional structure, right? And that 3-dimensional structure is the 64 tetrahedron grid, which has the vector equilibrium also integrated in it. So I follow that path, and obviously, if we have, we take this tetrahedron with that volume energy that we talked about coming from the primordial fractalization, and we create 64 of these tetrahedron to create the 64 tetrahedron grid. Well, the product of these two figures gives us 1/2528 in terms of harmonic energy. And that actually corresponds to the distance c, which is from the coordinate of origin, latitude 0, longitude 0, at the intersection of the prime meridian and the equator. So that distance to the Giza complex is 2528.76. So we have a very, very nice match again at 99.98%.
Very good. Wow.
Finally, and again, this all gets back to there's really nothing in the Giza complex and in its construction that is random, right? Everything has been done with a very purpose, and it's connected to quantum physics. And we see another thing here, that distance d, that the one that I had struggled a bit more, and I realized actually, right, that distance d on the map is 1796.76 nautical miles. And I realized that when we see here on top of the slide, if we ratio that distance in nautical miles by the speed of light harmonic in nautical miles per geometric seconds, which is close to harmonic 144, as we can see, the square, the c square, essentially, we get a figure, a mantissa that matches the Planck length expressed in nautical miles. The Planck length theoretical is 8.72708, and we get 8.73123. Again, we have a 99.95% match, and the Planck length is really the smallest oscillation of energy that can exist at the quantum space, right? And it is encoded in that distance. to a very high degree of accuracy. And there's something else that's also encoded in that distance that's pretty remarkable. So if we take that distance again 1798.76, and we ratio that this time over the speed of light harmonic instead of the speed of light harmonic squared, this time is just the speed of light harmonic, we get 12.53, which is essentially really close to 4 pi. And 4 pi is really special because if we take a sphere of energy or a sphere with a surface area equivalent to 4 pi, and we insert that sphere into a dodecahedron, right, to become an inscribed sphere within a dodecahedron, the volume energy of that dodecahedron will match the volume of our universe. The theoretical volume of our universe is in green here, is 5.614, to the power of 70 cubic nautical miles. Again, I just showed the significant figure here for simplicity, and the volume we're getting here with an inscribed sphere with a 4 pi surface area is 5.55. So we have a 99% match.
Remarkable.
So amazingly, these 4 corners of that pi square, as I call it, I discovered, was inspired to investigate a bit further and look what was located at these coordinates specifically. Obviously, on the upper right side, corresponds to the Giza complex that we were aware of. If we look at the bottom right here to the southeast location at these coordinates, we have something that's very interesting that seems to be sticking out of the environment here with, a little rock. And I will show in the slides, following the slides, some zoom in on this structure. And there's also something really interesting, looks like glyphs at the bottom here. And I'm going to show it in the next few slides. Bottom left, obviously, falls in the Atlantic Ocean. And amazingly, at coordinate 0 latitude, 0 longitude, we get this very interesting feature sticking out of the Atlantic Ocean here. And obviously, we don't see what it is, but it's clearly there's something there that, again, could be a remnants of an ancient civilization or something that's been built there, to match all this geometry we've been talking about. And finally, to the upper left side, on the northwest side, in the desert of Algeria, again, sticking out of the desert, there's something that's a feature that's really, really interesting. So I'll be really, really curious to, to have an expedition to look at these sites, obviously.
Very
something
interesting.
Something that's even as equally remarkable is that if we calculate the Earth surface area of that square, we end up with a figure of 3.13 millions of nautical miles squared, which matches the mathematical constant pi at a very high degree of accuracy. And if we, we all know that the mathematical constant pi here is the symbol for portals, right? And we see that encoded all over the world in ancient sacred sites, whether it is in Stonehenge, the Temple of Apollo, in Tonga, the Torii Gates in Japan. So there's something really profound about, about this figure that's related to portals. We see some zoomed in picture here of the site to the southeast in the prairie of Uganda. And I have a bit more zoom in picture. We see here this very weird dark slab of feature that I do not know what it is. Doesn't look like water because there's no rivers or anything, feeding it. And we see here on the upper side something that looks like glyphs of some sort, which we could even speculate here that looks like two beings. One is upside down. We see here a little head with eyes and legs and arms, and another one here. So again, will be really interesting to go investigate what it is and have a more zoom in version here.
Fascinating. Wow.
This one is the site northwest in the desert of Algeria. Again, the actual feature sticking out is, interestingly, is exactly at the distance equivalent to the side length of this tetrahedron within a Euclidean cube of coordinate ±1. So the balloon in red here is actually the coordinates of interest, and this site is located exactly at that diagonal here, which matches this side length of, again, to the square root of 8, which happens to match, by the way, in terms of nautical miles, looking at the significant figure, matches 2 Planck lengths times 1 golden ratio. we have a bit more zoomed in version here. And finally, this is the site in the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, that's sticking out. There's clearly some disturbances in the ocean that's causing this thing to stick out. And anyone can go see it, by the way, for yourself. If you go on Google Earth and you type 0,0 to go to that coordinates, you will see that site. You just need to zoom in. So it's accessible to anyone. Okay, the next part and final part of this presentation, what I want to show is that this mechanism of universal creation that's encoded there provides a direct solution to the makeup of our universe. I'm going to go to this in a bit detail here. So in 2006, there was a satellite that was launched called the Planck satellite that we see here on the screen on the upper left side. And the Planck satellite was purposely sent into space to record data and record the cosmic microwave background, right, in order to assess and quantify the contribution of what we call dark matter, dark energy, and visible matter. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, our mainstream science really can explain only 5% of the universe. 95%, they had to make up 95% of energy, if you will, or mass energy to make it work. Otherwise, the model doesn't work. Primarily, obviously, we know what visible matter is, which represents, as I said, about 5% if you round that number. The dark matter, mainstream science had to create dark matter to explain the cohesion, the gravitational cohesion within galaxies and star clusters, right? There was not enough, essentially, gravity, from the regular matter to keep everything together, to glue everything together, right? Just with the speed of the stars, circling around a galactic center, right? There was not enough gravity to keep them in orbit, right? They literally will escape that orbit if there was not enough gravity. So they had to create what they call dark matter, which has a gravitational impact. They can measure the gravitational impact, but they cannot see what that dark matter is, what that energy is. Now, the dark energy now, which is even more significant, which represents over 69% of our universe, well, mainstream science had to make up this energy to explain the expansion of the universe, right? Because our universe is accelerating in expansion. It's an expansion that's accelerating. So mathematically, if you calculate the amount of energy that's required to essentially go against the gravity, right, and pull the universe to make it expand, they had to create this dark energy, right? Now, what I found is that amazingly, these percentages matches very nicely the percentages of the volume energy distribution within the tetrahedron, which we covered earlier, right? If we look, the inside the tetrahedron, represents 30.23% of the volume energy of the total, volume of the tetrahedron, and the residual volume energy outside the tetrahedron represents 69.77%. So we see a very nice match here where the dark energy at 69.17 coming from this Planck satellite matches very nicely the residual energy outside the inscribed sphere. And if we add up the dark matter and visible matter, right, it add up to 30.79, matches very nicely that volume energy inside the tetrahedron. So I did some calculation so first, what we see on this slide here, again, we see the dark energy, dark matter, and visible matter. So the results from the Planck satellite itself, which, by the way, has an uncertainty in the order of 1 to 2%, right? All the Planck satellites, these are actual experimental measurements, right? They're measuring, different speed of stars, gravity, and so on, right? So there's an uncertainty on that. And that uncertainty is in the order of 1 to 2%. So what we saw earlier, comparing the distribution in the universe and the tetrahedron, falls well within that margin of error.
Very good.
And so what they did here, they converted in white here the mass density equivalent of dark energy, dark matter, and visible matter in the universe, right? And that's the data that they have published, and it's been referenced extensively in science. The data coming from the satellite, which was purposely sent to collect this data. And so, so on my side, what I ended up doing is converting the energy from the primordial fractalization mechanism, this geometric harmonic energy. I converted that into the same units into a mass density in kilogram per cubic meter, so we can compare apple with apple, and we see the figures that I got here. So interestingly, amazingly, we see that there's in each cases there's an accuracy or a match between the Planck satellite data and the results coming from the primordial fractalization. There's a 99% match and above between these two models, which helps really validate that really all this energy that mainstream science does not know where it is coming from actually comes from this primordial fractalization mechanism in a very quantitative way, because these calculations are really made carefully and accurately. So to me, that's provide the direct answer to these big mysteries of the universe, which as of today have been remained unresolved.
Yeah.
And I think that was ending my presentation here.
Fantastic, Jimmy. Really good stuff. Okay. Well, it's only taken a lifetime to get there, right?
That's right.
Very good.
Right.
Well, we'll present that. We're presenting that to the panel, and greatly looking forward to fielding some feedback and scrutiny from the Genius crew during the symposium. Jimmy, thank you so very much. Fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Terrific stuff. Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Christy, for that piece. Charlie, your initial reflections on that 24-minute piece.
Lots to take in there, but I have a couple of questions, if I could, Jimmy. First, in the very first video you did, where you lined up all of the various ancient sites, that didn't seem to be on any specific latitude or longitudinal line. Could you tell us how that curve is kind of developed, or that line is developed?
Yeah. So I mean, really, that line, as you said, it's actually not on specific latitude or longitude. It's a bit kind of sideways. Actually, that line, and I have a slide on it. I can put some visual on it. If you create
share your screen, if you want to share your screen, yes, we can do it, Jimmy.
Perfect. I have this here actually, so let me just share my screen. Present, share screen.
Charlie, whilst he's doing that, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's just once again demonstrating that the Platonic solids geometry are just, I mean, that's how the universe is built and constructed. It's just more examples that this is the case. And, I'm fascinated by this. I have another question too, Jimmy, once we're done with this one, but just amazing research.
Thank you. Are you able to see the slide, Sasha? Are you able to put it in?
Yeah. I mean, we're showing your screen right now.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So what we see here really is...
No, we're not seeing anything. We're just seeing your screen and an infinity loop of your... There we go. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I have the double screen, so I have to use a specific side of that. Okay. So if we essentially what we see, these sites are all aligned through that red band here, right? And it goes around the Earth. If we will be making a North Pole corresponding to that alignment, the North Pole will be right there, located in kind of northwest Canada, southeast Alaska. Okay. And what's remarkable about this is if we compare that old North Pole location, I call it old North Pole, I'm assuming, right, that maybe the pole shifted or something, right? But clearly these sites are pointing the finger to that North Pole. Now, if we calculate the angle between that old North Pole, quote unquote, and the current North Pole is an angle of 23.5 to 24 degrees, which happens to correspond to the tilt of the Earth in the precession of the equinox, right? So it's really, really interesting that this information is encoded in these sites, and it really begs the question that were they aligning these sites, and I'm speculating here, obviously, but did they align these sites to point the finger to that quote-unquote old North Pole? and to warn us about a cycle, right? So, one of these cycle of potential pole shift cycle, that maybe this was the old North Pole, and now we have the current North Pole, and that angle happens just to match this 23.5 degree tilt. And it's interesting also to note that the Great Pyramid of Giza itself points towards true north, right? So, and that the Great Pyramid of Giza is on that line, essentially aligned to that old North Pole, but the Giza Pyramid itself is pointing towards a true north, again at that 24.5, 24 degrees tilt angle. So that's an interesting fact. You know, I did an analysis on this. It was you know, I'm showing here that all these ancient sacred sites that were in the video here, this is the latitude and longitude of these sites, and also the distance to that quote unquote older North Pole. And it's all about, obviously, you know, the maximum distance you get between an equator and the North Pole is 5,400 nautical miles. Again, I'm using the nautical mile system here because it's compatible with geometry, and we know geometry is your universe is based on geometry, obviously. So, and the average distance 5,398. And one thing that I realized also doing this analysis of this alignment was that I looked at the physics of black holes, and that's where things really get really interesting, because it really clearly the physics of black holes and micro singularities is encoded in this information. What we see here to the upper left side is that equation is the Schwarzschild metric, right, that all the astrophysicists use to calculate the diameter or the size of black hole. So I did a minor modification to that essentially, and I have a slide here. Let me go back here so that I can show you where that's coming from. Give me 1 second here. So this is the Schwarzschild metric we see on the upper left side. That's widely known, used by astrophysicists. R is the radius of the black hole, and the M is the mass of the black hole. C square is the speed of light square. Obviously, the G is the gravitational constant. So I reworked a bit that equation and integrated it with the E = mc squared, the famous general relativity equation, and combined these two equations together so we could essentially determine or calculate the size of a black hole based on the energy as opposed to the mass. Because when we use these geometric harmonics figures, we deal directly with energy, and I can talk about that in a second. And the other thing I did on that formula was, instead of looking at the radius, we're going to be using at the diameter, right? And so, just to give it a practical application of this, and we saw in the video earlier that what we consider like empty space is actually full of energy, right? And so, in the match really of that energy, when we do that primordial fractalization into a tetrahedron, is to 1 to 1. So 1 cubic nautical miles or cubic minute of arc would equal 1 unit of energy. And just to show how this is accurately encoded in these sites, so if we take, for instance, the volume energy, right? Again, because the volume of space equal energy, it's full of energy. So if we take the volume of the old Great Pyramid, the original Great Pyramid, before it was stripped of its casing stones, right? The data is available. So I essentially inputted these dimensions of the original pyramid into a calculator and calculated the volume energy equivalent and answered that energy, that E40801 harmonic, into that equation here. And we essentially end up with a mini black hole diameter of 3.1413, which matches this famous mathematical constant pi again at 99.99%. I mean, the accuracy is absolutely stunning and remarkable. Again, pi being the symbol for portals. And we see it here in the slide. We saw that in the video. The pi is the symbol for portal. I did the same analysis actually on all the 3 pyramids of Giza. So the one to the left is what we just talked about. Again, this mini black hole equivalent, diameter equivalent to pi. The Menkaure pyramid happens to be exactly 10 times less voluminous than the Great Pyramid, but the volume energy is the same harmonic, 406,173. Plug that into the Schwarzschild metric to calculate the black hole diameter corresponding, and we get, again, something close to pi at 99.4%. Now, it's interesting here also because if we look at the Great Pyramid and the Menkaure pyramid, which have these black holes equivalent to pi, now we look at our sun. You know, the mass of our sun, which is 1.989 to the power of 30 kilograms. When we convert that mass energy into or that mass of the sun into energy, you see equal mc squared, we get this energy here, 412.3 to 1, which matches really closely the volume energy of the Great Pyramid of the Menkaure Pyramid itself, which also renders a black hole, mini black hole diameter, which will match the constant pi. You know, we all heard about these the pyramid being some kind of ascension chamber, or there's a portal in it and things like that. You know, there's a lot of talks about this and from various people. But we see from a mathematical standpoint, when we use geometric harmonic units, we get these figures that are remarkable. And finally, the Khafre pyramid to the right side is quite remarkable too, because the volume energy of that structure yields a volume energy that is really, really close to the volume energy of the subatomic particles making up our material world, that is the proton and neutron, right, and electrons. So there's a match at 99.3%. And if we turn that energy into plug that into the Schwarzschild metric, we get a mini black hole diameter equivalent to 432 over golden ratio. And these ratio always, and I'm sure Charlie, looking a bit at your work, you see that. I mean, this ratio, golden ratio, this harmonic 144, 432 comes back over and over again, you know, and we see it here actually, that even the very structure, the very dimension of the Great Pyramid of Giza itself is filled with these harmonics, right? If we look at the hypotenuse, and this is in the metric system actually, not in the nautical miles. I can explain in a second why. But if we convert the hypotenuse of the Great Pyramid, which is 186.6, into harmonics, it's equivalent to 432 squared, right? If we look at even the slope angle of the Great Pyramid, which is 51.84 degrees, is equivalent to harmonic 432, or 43.2 times the square root of harmonic 144. The base is a function also of harmonic 144 golden ratio, the height, and even the number of stones, which is in the area of 2.33 million of stones, is equivalent to harmonic 144 times golden ratio at very high degree of accuracy. And the ratios to the right side of the Great Pyramid, we ratio the hypotenuse over the half base, we get golden ratio. Ratio the height over the half base against the square root of the golden ratio, and so on, right? We see these relationships there. And apparently, you know, from the text, there were 144,000 casing stones, you know, covering the Great Pyramid. And these are, Sasha, these harmonics that we're talking about here, harmonic 144, golden ratio 1432, all the harmonics that were communicated, that have been communicated physically through my camera, you know, during transmissions in the solar system. And I have the screenshot of it, and these were the same harmonics that were communicated. So I see really a correlation with what we're talking about.
So let's just get some feedback from Charlie thus far, Jimmy. We need to hear his input along the way.
Sasha, I'm just having a ball watching this, but I've got so many questions. I mean, Jimmy, do you think that this information was actually part of a working system here, or was this just a way of showing us these relationships so that we could figure it out on our, you know, what are you getting out of your research in terms of the purpose of the pyramids, I guess is the question.
Well, the pyramids, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, right? Yeah. All this information that's encoded in these ancient structure very clearly leads to a new perspective on physics, which is based on geometric harmonics. Everything is about geometry, and I know your work really, I think, points towards that, right? And it's very simple, actually. You know, it's very simple geometry. The platonic solids and you know, this geometric harmonic is that new perspective on physics that's missing currently in our physics. And again, that information is encoded in ancient sacred sites, in manifestations from UFOs, Rendlesham and many others. Even the location of the ancient sacred sites versus the Earth grid, right, encodes these harmonics. And so that's what I'm really getting at, is that it looks like the intelligence, and these intelligence have communicated the keys to the universe all along in various ways. And essentially for us to remember or rediscover at some point in our history, which is now, and we all kind of all doing a little piece of the puzzle, right? There's a lot of great researchers out there like you and others that we have all a piece of the puzzle, but it all converges to this new perspective on physics. And I'm, you know, I have literally 1,500 slides of material. So, you know, what I'm showing is just a little slice of it. But really, this comes with this really produce really a physics that works, right? I can explain the Planck length, for instance, right? Where's the Planck length coming from? It's really the you know, we take a circle that has a diameter of 1. Again, everything's about the division of the 1 or the unity, and there are 360 degrees in a circle. So what is the length of each degree in a circle of 1 diameter? And we get the Planck length in terms of, you know, geometric harmonics. But it's really key to use the proper unit, and that's why I mentioned the nautical mile system. And that strategy actually was developed by Bruce Cathy, a very famous researcher who passed away, you know, many years ago. But I'm sure you know Bruce Cathy. So he developed some of the basics, mathematical principle. But by using the nautical miles, which match 1 minute of arc in geometry, we can see nature with a different eyes, with a different perspective. Similarly, it's important to convert the time, also the time scale we're using, the regular seconds, if you will, convert that time into a geometric harmonic time. And I have actually, I'm going to just put one slice on the screen, Sasha, I want to show here. And for those who are interested to do the calculations, let me go back to it here. Okay, so for those who are interested to do the calculation, I have...
forgive me, Charlie, jump in anytime at all. Yeah, anytime, just barge right in.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I'm showing here, Charlie, if you're interested to do these calculations or double check, so I have converted all the physics constants that are in all regular physics, not all, but at least the most important ones. So what we see out of the various metrics, the second, the Planck constant, the gravitational constant, for instance, the speed of light, harmonic, the Planck length, and so on, right? All the Planck mass. So what is in white in that picture here are the current units per mainstream science with the standard units in the metric system, you know, in the international standard system. And what we see in blue is the conversion of these units, these figures, into geometric harmonic units, right? That is in the nautical mile system and geometric second. And these are the numbers I'm using to do these calculations, and which renders all these amazing figures that, you know, I can even show, for instance, that, let me show you here, you know, here's one that's interesting. So if we take, for instance, the best estimated volume of our universe, again in cubic nautical miles, and we feed that volume energy into the Schwarzschild metric I talked about, we end up with a black hole universe that will have a diameter equivalent to harmonic 432, you know, 431.5 to be more accurate. I mean, what are the odds of that, right? I mean, this is just what comes out of this calculation is just remarkable. Even for instance, the Royal Egyptian cubit is not an accident. When we convert the length of the Royal Egyptian cubit into the minutes of arc on nautical mile system, we end up with a figure here of 2.8272, which matches exactly 2 Planck lengths times 1 golden ratio. So even the Royal Egyptian cubit is connected to quantum physics that seem to have been a measurement system based on quantum physics. And that figure actually also matches the side length of that tetrahedron here within a Euclidean cube of coordinate plus minus 1. Again, we use a cube of coordinate plus minus 1 because everything in our universe is the division of the source, right, from source creation. So that is the foundation of it. And if we insert that Merkaba, if you will, or tetrahedron within that cube, that length here is equivalent to the Royal Egyptian cubit, which is, again, 2 Planck lengths times 1 golden ratio. I don't have the slide there, but this mathematics leads to the solution of the fine structure constant. It's based on that. You know, I don't have the slide in this deck here. I can find it. So there's so many things. If you look, for instance, you know, there are speculations, and some psychics have mentioned that, very known psychic, famous actually, that have mentioned that there was a sphere of energy surrounding the Great Pyramid, for instance. So if we take the height of the pyramid as the radius of that sphere, we end up with a volume energy equivalent to c squared, the speed of light squared, you know, from the famous E equal mc squared. So what are the odds of that? At 99.99% of accuracy. So there's so much information that's encoded in these structures, the location and the dimensions. But if we're not using the proper geometric harmonic units, we're not seeing it, right? But once we use the proper units, we all see this ratio relationship. And by the way, interestingly, if we ratio the volume energy of that sphere around the Great Pyramid over the volume energy of the pyramid itself, that ratio gives us the volume energy of the King's Chamber. At pretty high degree of accuracy, 99.6%. What are the odds of that again, right? So there's so much to unpack there. I'm just showing a slice of it, but just wanted to give some of the foundation. And
Thank you, Jimmy.
Anyone who wants to communicate and have this information, I'm happy to help.
One last question, Jimmy. I know that you've done that analysis of the interior, on the tetrahedron, the sphere that would be inside to the total volume. Have you looked at other relationships of that type, like using the Giza geometry or other sacred geometry ratios? I don't know if that would show you anything or not.
Yeah, there's more work to be done there. It's an open field, right? There are so many paths that this information can take. But one thing that I've dug into also, and I have it on the slide here if you want to show it to Sasha. One thing that I dug into this primordial fractalization mechanism was that if we take this, let me just put it full screen here. Give me 1 second here. So if we take this volume energy inside the sphere, the inscribed sphere, the 1868, and we feed that as a volume energy again in the Schwarzschild metric, we end up with a black hole diameter which matches harmonic 144. And actually the value of that black hole diameter here, 143.5, is matching the high accuracy speed of light harmonic. When we really convert the speed of light harmonic in a vacuum, convert that into nautical miles per geometric second, we get that figure really, really close to that, like 99.99% match. So it's interesting that this suggests, actually, this mathematics seems to be suggesting that we actually live in a black hole universe. It seems to be what this intelligence has been or has encoded in the location of the Great Pyramid, because the math works so well that it's just hard to believe these are just coincidence, because we're getting 99.x% accuracy on all these figures. So and yeah, I mean, there's a lot more work to be done on this. One thing I'm working on right now is that, I mean, Plato always taught us that the universe was a dodecahedron. And I'm seeing this relationship, actually, that this energy, let me just show that picture here. So that's these energies actually are funneled through a dodecahedron structure. And I'm working on the math on this. I'm 75% done, but indeed, that's the suggestion that what we just saw in this primordial fractalization was just phase one, but there's a phase two to it. It keeps essentially evolving in a fractal, obviously in a fractal fashion, right? A fractal sequence. And this keeps growing and going into a bit more complex structure of the platonic solid. So the math works really well so far, but there's a bit more work to be done, of course, on this.
Very cool.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Jimmy. Way over my head. I'm delighted to say, way over my head. And I've got a bunch of generic questions that have been put in front of me, just that Christy prepared. But just, Charlie, just summarize, if you will, what you've heard from coming out of Jimmy in the last, it's actually been 1 hour, believe it or not, since we started the segment. But what is your takeaway from the last hour, Charlie?
Well, it just further confirms that the world that we live in is based upon the golden ratio and sacred geometric principles. We're just seeing it manifest yet in another way, and we're seeing how sacred geometry plays into the creation of dark matter and our physical experience. I mean, it's just an amazing thing to see how important the golden ratio is in our cosmology, and yet we're not taught anything about it in school. So
I bet that's the staggering thing, isn't it? I mean, the great works of Peter Lemesurier, I think, for me, underscored all of that initially.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm focused right now in fluid dynamics, but you know, the engineering world doesn't know this, and yet it's the angle that, you know, the golden ratio shows up. That's the angle you want to put in your nose cone, and nobody knows it.
Does Elon Musk know it?
He seems to know it. It shows up in SpaceX. It shows up also in the engines that power the SpaceX, the nozzles. So we'll be talking about all of that next month. Yeah,
indeed. And Charlie, if Musk were to call on you as a consultant on his genius crew, because you must have been observing with some keenness, you know, his activities over the last few years.
sure.
But what if he asked you for a 3-minute brain dump advisement of his whole metric? What would you say to him?
Well, I mean, I'm giving away what I'm going to talk about next month, and that's okay. But I mean, every airplane, every missile, every rocket, every hypersonic vehicle on the planet uses golden ratio scaling in its geometry, and that's because there apparently is embedded in the fabric this geometric angle that minimizes drag and therefore increases fuel efficiency and speed. So it's just there, and there's no way, no way to get around it, except for the fact that well, I'll leave this for next week. They all of the successful ones work except for one country's, and that's ours. And I'm going to be showing you why.
So a dumb question from me, because some of my audience are as dumb as I am. Does the same fluid dynamics math that you deploy, does it apply to, for instance, warp speed? You know, when you get into hyperdimensional physics and warp speed, do we bypass all of the language of fluid dynamics when we get into that kind of science?
Well, I mean, you're going to find that this geometry shows up whether you're flying a biplane, whether you're floating a boat in the water, or whether you're flying a hypersonic missile. So it doesn't, the principles are all, stay the same, no matter what environment or what speed we're going. It's just easier to see it in faster vehicles.
Right, gotcha. But I mean, we're all seeing with the release of the Pentagon files and the extraterrestrials, the UFOs, all of that stuff is now becoming populist mainstream narrative, and a lot of questions are going to emerge in the coming months and years about hyperdimensional physics and about warp speed and about how the fuck did they get from the Zeta Reticulan constellation to all the rest of it. Yeah, but I was just wondering how fluid dynamics. Is there a point at which we depart from fluid dynamics?
I'm sure there must be, but in this realm, in this 3D realm, I think we're pretty much stuck to working within these geometries. Now, that's why I was asking Jimmy earlier. I'm fascinated because I want to do the research on different geometric angles and forms of pyramids to see how those relationships change and whether that might have something to do with hyperdimensionality as well. So I know that they're in the Gothic cathedral steeples, so that's where I want to start and maybe do that kind of an analysis and see if I find anything.
Very good. Very good. And Charlie, given your research into, I'm reading a question that Chrissy just sent through to me because I said, give me something clever for Charlie. She says, given your research into the tetrahedron and the golden ratio, how do you believe these geometric principles were intentionally integrated into the design of ancient monuments to enhance their ability to channel or manipulate cosmic energy?
Well, we know from Russia that any physical form, from research in Russia, from Anatoly Akimov, that any geometric form that contains the golden ratio will act as a passive torsion generator, which can mean many things, but I believe it means a free energy generator. So whenever you see the golden ratio, you know that creation is involved, and very likely that it's tied into some potential for free energy.
Very good. Very good. Jimmy, you're nodding sagely there. Any disagreement there?
No disagreement at all. Actually, perfectly aligned there with what Charlie's saying. I mean, one thing also I'm clearly seeing, and I've done some study on it. I have slides, on this. The Earth grid itself is based on that. And for instance, if we take the distance between Machu Picchu and the North Pole, which is the Earth grid reference, you get exactly 1 over golden ratio, 6,180 nautical miles. If you take the distance between Chichen Itza, which is a very famous site, and the Great Pyramid of Giza, it's 6,180, again, 1 over golden ratio. These distances, right, on the Earth grid, it's all mapped based on these golden ratio proportions and these harmonics. And I see clearly that there's a lot of that information that's encoded there. Even actually many of the UFO sightings, and I've done some, like the Catalina Islands, for instance. If you look at the distance between Catalina Islands, famous UFO sightings, and the Great Pyramid of Giza, you get a whole number of harmonic 144. And this was actually, I mean, that was part of the work of Bruce Catt. He actually demonstrated that a lot of the UFO sightings were based on these harmonics and these golden ratio proportions, right? Because it's all part of the Earth grid. And whether the intelligence was producing these manifestations to show us that information, or they're actually using these corridor of energy on the Earth grid to travel and manifest themselves is remains to be known, obviously, but clearly that there's a connection there. You take, for instance, the UFO landing site in Rendlesham Forest, right? The famous Rendlesham Forest UFO landing. The distance between that site and the Great Pyramid is exactly harmonic 432 squared, right? So it's all connected to these harmonics on the Earth grid that clearly they have been, from my perspective, trying to communicate it to us and using that energy also from
Jimmy, the 144,000 144,000 versus the 144,100. What's the discrepancy there? The distinction between 144,000, 144,100.
Good question. I mean, I used the 144.1 initially because that was a frequency I had chosen to broadcasting on, and my antenna system were tuned to that. But generally speaking, the 144,000 is the speed of light harmonic in nautical miles per geometric second, like at the electromagnetic level, really at the pure geometric level, right? But then obviously, as you get in the vacuum speed of light harmonic, you get a number that's slightly lower than that, more on 143.5. But it's really all comes down to this harmonic 144. And that harmonic 144 is the division of the unity itself really yields this harmonic. And I have I don't think I prepared a slide here. I can find it, but really, there's the light energy that's that creates all our universe. Really, from the physics that and the mathematics I'm working on is all based on harmonic 144. Even the golden ratio itself, right? If you take the 1 and you divide by 3 times the speed of light harmonic 144 squared, you get the golden ratio, right? So even the golden ratio itself has a connection to this harmonic of creation. So it's really the fundamental harmonic of light is really 144. That's this spark of light energy that from which everything emerges. And all these mathematical formulas or physics formula, there's one common denominator really, and that's this harmonic 144. Really.
Charlie, is that completely coherent with your experience and understanding?
It all seems to fit to me, Sasha. I'm going to want to do some more research and study Jimmy's work, but I know that this is going to fit. I'm going to find a lot to explore in this and bring into my own work. So
terrific. And I've got to say, Charlie, someone's asking the question that I simply have to ask Charlie. I agree with everything you've said, but need to know, Charlie, is the Earth round? And they want your answer to this.
Are you saying, is it a sphere? Or is it round?
Is it round or is it a sphere? Is it an ovoid? Is it a torus? Is it a flat plane? Is it a hologram? What is your bottom line on this?
My bottom line is that there's plenty of data to indicate that a flat Earth model could actually be the correct answer, but there's also so many unknowns that I don't want to. I would love to have an honest discussion on this with some people someday.
Which people? Because I think we should revisit it. We've done flat Earth panels a few years ago with Santos Bonacci and other vociferous voices on the subject. Michael Tellinger, who's a beloved friend of mine, who actually came to visit me here in Cape Town about a week or so ago, and we spent a day together. And I'll be going up country to spend a couple of days with him probably next week. But Michael Tellinger, many years ago, 7 years ago, phoned me and animatedly and said, without any question of doubt, the Earth is a torus. It's a fucking donut. You know, Santos Bonacci was swearing flat can only be flat. But I've heard so many different perspectives and angles. I'm still eternally fascinated by the subject.
Oh,
I have to say one thing, Charlie, that in order, I remember David Avocado Wolf also phoned me and said years ago, I heard that you're about to go public on your notion that the Earth is flat. I said, no, absolutely not. I said, I'm not convinced. I said, I'm absolutely convinced it's flat, but I'm equally convinced that it's not. And I'm equally convinced of all of these models. And that's where my fascination lies. Whereupon, as some of our followers here know, I put a challenge there. And Thomas J. Brown, very brilliant physicist and mathematician, who is also a fellow at our university, the New Earth University, took up the challenge and using stellar parallax and other very advanced mathematical modalities, did a paper, took many, many months. And he applied the same very advanced mathematics to all of these different models. And at the end of it, essentially said to me, Sasha, we've got a problem, because the same mathematics effectively endorses all of these different models. And he said, that's the takeaway. So make of that what you will. And I said, well, I'm stupid, you're clever, so what do you make of it? And he said, the only thing we can deduce from this is that the world is a holographic quantum intelligence, which morphs and comports itself to what the Imagineer wants it to be. And so essentially we're living in a cauldron, a cocktail, a soup of limitless quantum probabilities and possibilities and outcomes and event horizons. And the group collective can determine essentially whether the Earth presents itself as in any given arc of civilization or time. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it does make sense to me. I mean, when you really start to think about it, the research from Australia at the Australian National Laboratories, they redid the experiments, the double slit experiments.
Yeah.
And essentially what they came up with is that, they didn't make that decision until it had passed the point of no return, so to speak. And they still found that what they determined was that consciousness is what grabs into this ether and pulls down one of an infinite number of possible results and creates it.
So the observer determines the outcome.
That's what it certainly seems to. Yeah.
Right.
And so with that in mind, yes, consciousness has to almost sort of like predate reality. I mean, in some senses, it has to come first. So,
well, we're all agreeing with you here, Charlie. You're amongst friends. Jimmy, is the Earth flat, round, torus, holographic, tetrahedron? Tell us, Jimmy. Tell us.
It's all holographic, really. Everything is holographic. That's what I'm seeing. There's, a lot of part of my research shows that everything, holographic universe, from the subatomic particles like the protons and neutrons and everything, is connected to a singularity, right? It's connected to, which is the umbilical cord, really, to source, right? And it's all geometric. It all follows these very same harmonics that we've been talking about. For instance, I mentioned the diameter of that kind of black hole singularity of subatomic particles is 432/1 golden ratio, right? And we see that if we lose like the DNA molecule, for instance, right? The volume energy of that, or the mass energy of a DNA molecule match 2 Planck lengths, right? And which again yields this these black hole or micro singularities that's connected to the sun and many other things. So there's like a common denominator that this mechanism seems to be connecting everything from the stars. We saw earlier that even our stars have a black hole equivalent to pi, which match the Great Pyramid. So there seems to be these umbilical cords that connects everything together for these singularities in our holographic universe, and that's why I believe it's really holographic.
Very good. Well, just for the record, Tarek says the Earth is round just like other planets. So there, Charlie and Jimmy, all right, learn from Tarek. And someone else, Karen, says it's pear-shaped.
Okay. All right.
I rather like that. I rather like that one. So I have another question, Charlie. This is one of my old questions that I used to ask on one-to-one, face-to-face interviews, which is that if you were having I've got two questions actually that I usually ask. One is to do with a banquet in the sky, and my question is, if you were to have the ultimate cosmic banquet in the sky, who would you invite? Half a dozen figures. Now they could be living, they could be dead, historical figures, whatever. But my preferred question is a little cheekier than that. It is if you were consigned to live on a desert island for all of infinity,
Right.
and don't say. The question is, who would you choose as a single companion for all of infinity on a desert island? And you can't say an Olympic swimmer. Other than an Olympic swimmer, who would you choose to be on your desert island for all infinity? Bear in mind, it can be your mother, but it could also be, a Napoleon Bonaparte. So,
are we worried about maintaining the species?
now that's talk about a cheeky question. It's a very good question, but remember, you're consigned for all of eternity with one compadre, one companion.
Well, I understand. So, should it be female to continue the species?
That all rather depends on your predilections, doesn't it, Charlie?
Well, not if I'm trying to reproduce. No.
Well, you can't reproduce because there's only going to be you and it, or her, or him.
Okay.
So
all right.
I would suggest you've got to decide. If
I would say Plato.
Okay, very good. So the question then becomes, why Plato and why not the real mind, Socrates?
Well, Plato was the person to whom the knowledge of the quadrivium is attributed. So I'm going to assume that he's going to perhaps be the best person to explain all of the remaining relationships between math, geometry, harmonics, and cosmology.
Very good. I have to caution you, however, that he was a sodomite, so he might be chasing you around that one palm tree on the island for infinity.
Well, now that you bring that up, no, I might change, but he'd still be a hell of a lot of fun to talk to.
Too late, Charlie. Too late. Jimmy, same question to you, Jimmy.
I think that question is much harder than all the mathematics we've been talking about. So that's it's a tough questions. If you're interested, Sasha, I just put something on the screen. It's related to what we're talking about.
Yep.
That's an example here, and I think Charlie will like this one. That's one of the manifestation that I recorded on video, and I have a screenshot of it, obviously, what I call the golden ratio triangular craft. So that shape, we see a bigger picture here. I was broadcasting towards Arcturus, and actually the message I broadcasted was an invitation message for this craft to manifest, because it had already manifested 3 times in the past. So I was kind of asking that intelligence to return. So I got a good screenshot. I did some analysis from all the screenshots I've had, and what I found is that this graph, for instance, is perfectly golden ratio proportion. So for instance, if we take the side at the bottom here and we ratio that bottom side over the upper left side, we get a golden ratio. If we take the length of the upper left side over the length of the upper right side, we get golden ratio. And if we take the length of the bottom side over the length of the upper right side, we get golden ratio squared. So it's a perfectly golden ratio triangle. In any way we ratio these sides. And what was remarkable to me in that siding, also in this analysis, I use the software, as you can see, to do this analysis, that the angle here to the left was matching 4.32 degrees, which happens to be one of the frequency I was broadcasting on. I was broadcasting this message on 432 and 144.1 megahertz. And the angle to the right side is 6.94 degrees, which matched the reciprocal of harmonic 144. So here we were again with these golden ratio and harmonics of creation that were communicated through this siding that I recorded. And that's how really, a lot of my work unfolded after that, because I started decoding this information. We see even, for instance, the Rendlesham forest coordinates that were communicated back in 1980. What we see here to the right side is the actual latitude that was communicated. And that latitude and longitude was the coordinate for the Great Pyramid of Giza. But we realize again that the mathematics of it, what they encoded in this coordinates, this latitude, was essentially this side length that of this tetrahedron here. And when we convert that side length into a circle circumference using pi over 360, and we multiplied that by the coordinates communicated by this craft, we end up with the fine structure constant at 99.9998% of accuracy. So even this craft actually was encoding, all these coordinates were encoded very, very profound mathematics and physics. It's really, this is what led me to that, going down that path.
Very good. Thank you. Charlie, any comments there?
It's another question, Jimmy. I mean, how were you able to measure that, those points, without having a perspective on how it was sitting in three-dimensional space?
It's an excellent question. I asked myself the question too, because I have other screenshots of that craft, right? But it seemed like the craft knew, or the intelligence positioned itself so that it was always in the correct angle from my perspective to have these proportions. So again, we're dealing with very advanced intelligence.
Well, and that could be it. They may have come in such a way that you could measure it easily. Yeah,
exactly.
But perspective and orientation was going to play a big part in how your measurements turned out.
Yep, exactly.
Wow.
I do have I have a video that's pretty spectacular, and it's maybe just 1 minute. It's another manifestation, not from me, but from a close friend who's a contactee also. And I do have a video of these craft that are making these geometric figures in the sky. So
yeah, I'd like to see that.
All right, let me just play this out here. It just takes a minute here. Okay, so give me 1 second. So here it is. So
whilst you're getting that ready, just so you know, someone called Daryl is saying you're very smart but no common knowledge. Daryl, you need to declare who that you're insinuating that toward, either Charlie or Jimmy or me. If it's me, I'll drop kick you out of the room. And if it's any of my guests, I'll leave them to deal with you. In any event, let's see if we've got this video up.
Okay, so give me 1 second here. So can you see the video? So what you're going to see here, she's a good friend of mine. She's a contactee. She's done a lot of contact work, and she has a fantastic footage. And one day she made a request to her cosmic family, if you will, to produce a manifestation in the form of a V shape. And so she made that request, and the given night during that evening, she was kind of compelled to go outside and use her night vision camera to start recording at the given time. And what you see here is the manifestations that took place. So let me play this, and we can talk about it after. Can you hear the sound? Okay.
Very
So
interesting.
there is actually, but I need to show you what the information encoded in this. And this is the most important portion of this. So let me just open up the slide here. Okay. Here we go. So she, let me put this, here we go. Okay, so Linda's her name, and then she allowed me, of course, to use her footage because there's important information encoded in this. In 2022, November, she asked me, she had seen some of my work, and she asked me to look into this footage if there was any information that was buried in there and encoded. So I did some analysis and took some screenshots. So you see here the V shape. I took a screenshot when the craft is stable. We could see we can draw a very nice baseline here with the angle. And what angle are we seeing again? Exactly 144 degrees. Now we see also these formations contracting and expanding again. So when we ratio the stretch configuration or versus the shrunk V-shaped formation, we end up with golden ratio squared. So golden ratio is revealed through that amazing sighting. And finally, we see in the footage towards the end that these craft orient themselves to produce a tetrahedron with an inscribed sphere. So I have the screenshot here. So it's very, very clearly, again, this tetrahedron with an inscribed sphere that comes back again. Now, what harmonic is this revealing? Well, there are a total of 720 degrees in a tetrahedron, as we know, and there are 60 minutes of arc per degree. So we end up again with this harmonic 432. So we end up essentially, this sightings is encoding this formula here, and I didn't spend time talking about this today, but this formula is this formula of the speed of light, actually. Once we convert the regular, electrical permittivity and electrical permeability into geometric harmonic units. And so these three harmonics and golden ratio, again, were encoded in this amazing sighting. So it's just one more example here that's connected, again, to this information, whether it was, if you recall, we got the same harmonics communicated through the golden ratio triangular craft that I showed earlier, right? This was the same thing that's encoded in this.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Jimmy. So, Jimmy, I've got a little bit of a nasty question here. Well, I don't know if it's a nasty question, but it's a very, very honest one. So I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a scientist, but I've been asking an awful lot of questions over an awful long time. And I've certainly met with scores and scores and scores of the cleverest people in the world over the last quarter of a century. No question about that. And I have to kind of sense and feel my way through hard math and hard science. I mean, I did spend 2 weeks in the late 90s on the other side of the moon on an extraordinary psychic journey. And when I came back, I was gabbling Z equals Z squared plus C. And it took a couple of weeks for someone who understood what I was saying to explain to me that that was the root of Mandelbrottian mathematics by the very brilliant Bernold Mandelbrot, who I then got in touch with a couple of years later, because in the trip that I had, which was a completely organic trip, I've never even puffed marijuana or chewed a mushroom in my life, nor will I ever. But I'd gone into a kind of psychic, shamanic thing, and being beamed off world for a couple of weeks, coming back, understanding Mandelbrottian, pretty advanced Mandelbrottian mathematics, which has never left me. It's actually the genesis point of all that I've been doing the last 25 odd years, was that extraordinary experience that I had. So I have a feel for fractality in the truest sense, if we apply the Mandelbrottian math to it. But I have to say that I'm one of these people who's also over many, many years, and I'm also an architect, studied architecture, and I understand the premise of golden ratio and pi and all of that as a premise, as a source code to a kind of golden age and golden architecture and the this kind of pre Greco-Romanesque basis of all that we perceive as being perfect and being beautiful. And I know that those ratios and that math applies to, the formation of leaves and all sorts of matrices of all of creation. I get that. And I get that ancient Greece was predicated on it and so on. And I understand that everything from iPhones and television sets, everything conspires to conform and comport to the Fibonacci. I get that. No part of that misses me. But I also sense quite deeply that it is a source code of the Luciferian, meaning to say the false light, not devilish, false light. So I believe that Fibonacci is ultimately that which prevents us from moving into our full superluminal emancipation, and that there is a math and a geometry beyond it, which we're in a sense required to break out of the false light notions of perfection, patterns of perfection, into the superluminal quantum. So I guess that's where crystal spiral dynamics and all the rest of it really comes in. That's really my question that I actually want to put to both of you. Jimmy, I'll start with you. Am I more or less on the right track there, or is, in your view, Fibonacci, the golden mean, the premise of all that ever is and all that ever shall be?
Oh, it's a very interesting question. I truly believe really that this information, how the golden ratio operates, the Fibonacci sequence, and all these harmonics we've been talking about, gives power. It's an immense source of power or potential power, which has been used by ancient civilizations clearly to harness energy from the earth and create anti-gravity and things like that. We have plenty of example of that. Now, that source of power can be used for good or dark purposes, no doubt about that. And so, I mean, we even see in our society or even in mainstream science that a lot of the true science has been hidden from us, right? The real stuff is not being taught at in the universities. So that source of knowledge, that the Freemasons and all that holds, as a lot of this, all these, secret societies have this knowledge, have portion of this knowledge, and can be used for good or bad. And I think that will be my answer to your question. It can be used for good or bad.
So Jimmy, it just so happens that the very brilliant Professor Alex Ling popped into the green room at my request. I sent a message out. He's in Mexico, and I said, because he was sending me a message, and I said, if you're there, you've got to jump into the studio. And as you said, Freemason, he came into the green room. Now, Dr. Alex Ling's father was the highest ranking grandmaster in Germany, the biggest lodge in Germany. Alex Ling is part Chinese, part Germanian, and he is from a very, very long lineage of Grand Master Freemasons. And we're very dear friends. He's actually sitting in my office right now in Mexico at the Bakalar Laguna, I can see. And he's been conducting some amazing experimentation with water. Actually, he's on George Nuri's Coast to Coast later today. So I didn't expect we'd see you, Alex. But Alex, thank you for jumping in. Your segment's coming up shortly, but I was hoping just to introduce you to the very brilliant Charlie Ziese and to Jimmy Blanchette, because there's going to be a conversation between all of you guys upcoming. But Alex, very briefly, the question, Jimmy, what was the inference you were making about Freemasons? Because if there's a single man who can answer that question, it's Alex Ling, whose grandmaster father left the Masons and was murdered resultantly, having been Grand Master of the most powerful lodge in Germany, because his father had worked out that the lodge to which he was Grand Master was involved in the sequestration initially, and then the purveyance of an alien technology that was going to be deployed. I think it was to the Super Hadron Collider in CERN in Switzerland, France, and to the detriment of humanity. You know, those compartmentalized elements within the Masonic lodges had been conducting very, very compartmentalized auctions over many, many generations. Whenever the Pentagon or the military in any country picks up an alien artifact or does a dig and discovers a Stargate in Baghdad, for instance, or an Ark of the Covenant in fucking the Wadi Rum Desert in Jordan, all of which have variously happened. Those technologies, ancient artifacts, alien skulls, and all sorts of out-of-place artifacts are immediately seized and have been for hundreds of years by the police, the sheriffs, the police, and the military, and are sequestered then at the British Museum, Royal Geological Society over hundreds of years, Smithsonian Institute, Vatican Library are the places where a number of these technologies go. But the hyper-compartmentalized midnight Masonic cliques inside the Masonic lodges, not known to most Masons, inside, they have been auctioning these very rare and sometimes very dangerous artifacts connected into very, very dark arts and sciences. If we wondered how the evil, the orchestra of evil has been conducted and perpetrated against humanity for the last, certainly for the last couple of centuries, this is the mechanism of how it's happened. And Alex's father rumbled this within his own Masonic lodge, and Skybosh stopped the deal with one of these midnight Masonic exchanges of artifacts and was resultantly killed. So sorry to be so long, but I felt I owed it to Charlie and to Jimmy and to some of the audience who don't know who Professor Alex Ling is and his extraordinary lineage. But Jimmy, you were just saying about the Masons. Do you want to repeat that piece that Alex could maybe answer that?
Yeah, sure. So, well, there's clearly the real knowledge is not in our mainstream science. We know that every time there's a breakthrough or real discovery that or made, this is shunned, that's not being allowed to be published in scientific papers typically. And it's really this alternative or this other perspective on physics and true science that's been clearly known for thousands of years and from ancient civilizations. But this seems to be part. I'm not an expert in that, and certainly, but it seems to be part of the secret knowledge, that's within these secret societies and group like the Masons, right? That and can be used for good or bad, right? But it seems to be that there's very deep, profound knowledge there that is very powerful. That's within these groups. So that would be my question.
Alex, your comments on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a guideline actually, which is established by these societies, if it is science or even in archaeology. So they have to stick to certain rules. Before something gets launched into the public, I can assure you, only a very small percentage of the truth is getting shared with the public, if at all. So most of the time, I have researched a lot of ancient sites and a lot of scientific evidence which goes with it hand in hand. For example, in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, they have for many decades, they have been sponsored by the societies of the rich. And some of them, for example, more as electronics companies like Siemens AG, which was also very much involved in the construction of the Large Hadron Collider. So I know for sure that most of the information when it comes to technical knowledge was actually coming from many of the archaeological digs in Turkey, which is inscripted in ancient text and on clay tablets and all sorts of different documentations from the past. And they would dig it up, and instead of sharing it out in the museums, it would disappear to certain institutions like Siemens AG, and my father was very deeply involved in these kind of, let's say, unofficial auctions, which was taking place all over the world. And very often these auctions were actually conducted by no other institutions like the universities themselves. So it's really something which is going on forever.
Thank you, Alex. Greatly appreciate that. Stand by for a minute, Alex, because we're just coming to the close of this segment, and then I wanted to briefly discuss the upcoming segment that you and I prepared some days ago. But you're on the ground in Mexico. You've made some incredible discoveries just in the last few days alone that you think are absolutely groundbreaking. You're there with some of your science team, and I'm very keen to just get a live dump on that. And I also suspect that that's what George Noory has heard, which is why you're on Coast to Coast later today. So just, are you able to stand by for 5 minutes, Alex? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Great stuff. Thanks very much indeed. So, Charlie, we're doing this book that I'm delighted that you're participating in. And I believe we've invited Jimmy Blanchette in. Yeah. Jimmy, have we formally invited you into the book?
Yes.
Okay. So we're taking forward the great works of the extraordinary Peter Lemesurier, the man who was the greatest influence, certainly in my teenage years, when I stumbled across the Great Pyramid Decoded, the great book that he wrote. It's been such an incredible influence on me throughout my life. And then last year, about a year and a half ago, thereabouts, the woman who was his literary agent approached me through a dear mutual friend and said that Peter Lemesurier, who died years ago, his estate, the people controlling his estate want to, in essence, have his work now re-released. And I was asked, A, had I heard of Peter Lemesurier, and secondly, would I be interested in helping to resurrect his incredible legacy? And I fell to my knees and said, there's nothing I wouldn't do for the man's memory, because he was such an incredible launch pad for me over 30 years ago. And so I've taken this forward. And then as we begin the process of re-releasing Peter Lemesurier's groundbreaking work, really the Bible, the Alpha Omega on the Great Pyramids, I thought to invite in the top guns on the planet that I know, who can speak to the subject of pyramids and pyramidology and the hard science and metaphysical science and hyperdimensional science behind pyramids and pyramidology. And Charlie Ziese is up there at top tier, as is Jimmy Blanchette, obviously Dan Winter, Dan Willis, and others participating in this. But Charlie, we're doing that book, and I believe you're. Have you written your chapter yet or not yet, Charlie? Am I having to chase you up or not?
I'm going to start writing it after this session, because now I have some time. I already have the information put together for next month, so I'll start writing probably tomorrow.
Oh, beautiful, Charlie.
I'll have it ready in about 30 days. So.
Oh, the publishers are going to be very happy to hear that. And Jimmy, you've been approached. I'm so glad, because I think you can bring something extraordinary to this book as well. And again, this book is going to reignite the entire legacy of Peter Lemesurier. So I think what we're doing is really important to 100 years later, or 75 odd years later, to recontextualize the importance of this extraordinary edifice. And it's not the most extraordinary edifice in the world. I mean, again, I was not so long ago in Sudan, and I was studying the Nubian pyramids, which are twice the age and some of them twice the height of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. But there's something about Giza Plateau, the Sphinx, and all roads lead to Rome. And I see it keep coming up in your science, Jimmy. So yeah, I just feel that we can do some remarkable magic in recatalyzing real interest in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Just in closing, Jimmy, you appear to be pioneering a whole new approach to the way that we view this world. And we thought we couldn't bring in better brains than David Sereda and Charlie Ziese. And I certainly want to invite Dan Winter in to also comments. I think Dan's looking at the film that you presented, and will come in with some feedback. Jimmy, where do you go from here? You've already been making consecutive first contact with extraterrestrials. You've now been learning in the course of that extraordinary work about this whole new approach to the mechanics of creation. Where do you go from here?
Well, I go where the information takes me, quite honestly. There's been, since 2021, I've had an enormous amount of inspiration coming to me, really like a waterfall of information just coming my way. And I'm just doing my best to translate that information into slides, into something that can be consumed by, the regular public, or, public that's somewhat a little bit technical. And so, as I said, my slide deck contains 1,500 slides right now. There's so much material. So I just follow the information, and, it's all, to me, so beautiful, and it's so profound. And I think also happens in our time of history where we have the Great Awakening happening, and this information needs to be known. What was just known by some of these secret societies, or a very small portion of, our population who control this information. I think clearly it's time for this information to be out in the public now and be consumed. So it's really a bit my role and my dedication to do this.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. Really appreciate that. And I know we're getting so many hundreds and hundreds of comments just on this one thread, and people very, very excited by this this kind of collaboration, or coming together of Charlie, Ziese, and yourself. Charlie, your takeaway today, please, on this very odd, somewhat quantum conversation.
Well, it's just as I told Christy when I first saw Jimmy's work, I said, "Oh boy, another example of somebody looking at the golden ratio in architecture and in the cosmos." And that's really what this is all about. We're all doing different little bits and pieces of this, but all of this information is showing that the golden ratio is literally at the heart of our cosmology. Jimmy's done an amazing amount of work here. I'm going to be showing some work next month that shows from a whole different perspective that the golden ratio is built into the fabric of the universe. So we're on to some really important things. I know that I see some great stuff coming out of my research. Jimmy's got plenty of stuff coming. I can't wait for this book to see how this collaborative effort's going to push forward the knowledge base as well.
Terrific. Charlie, thank you so very much for joining us on Lazarus today. And Jimmy, thank you so very much, brother. So lovely seeing you again. And I'll be in touch privately, because I want to pick up on some other matters with you. Thanks both so very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Alex, so we've got the segment coming up fairly soon. Let me just get my bifocals on, because I'm somewhat blind. Hang on.
Something quite extraordinary happened.
Oh, go on. Tell me.
So, as you know, I'm going to kidnap your sister and Dwayne and your dog to go to the zone of silence. And,
I heard.
Yeah. So the reason for that is that the two blueprints which I've taken, one from Bakalar and the other one way back in April, when we witnessed the eclipse, there is a huge similarity between the two. It's just like a different, a more upgraded version, let's say, from Bakalar. But the message is pretty much the same. It's both about a portal. So there's a portal in Mapimi, and there's a portal here in
Bakalar, at the waterfront of our New Earth sanctuary that we're developing there. Is that where you took the water samples?
Yes. And
in the simplest terms, for those members of the audience who don't know what we're talking about the New Earth sanctuary that we're building on the banks of the Laguna Bakalar on the Mayan Riviera in Mexico. And you've been there for the last few days with some of your crew. You went specifically to be able to take some water samples and put them under your scientific scrutiny, under microscopy. What have you discovered in simple terms?
In simple terms, that there is for sure a portal within the waters, the lagoon of Bakalar. And it's very, very similar to the same portal which we have taken the blueprint from the dunes from Linda Vista, which is a very well-known UFO hotspot. And inside the sand, when we unlock the blueprint, we have seen that these two blueprints are literally almost identical, except they have slightly different colorations. And that's because purely one has water and the other one hasn't got the water anymore, but it still has all the information within the dunes, the sand. And I tell you something which I would never usually say publicly, but I believe through the conversation I just had with the guys from Linda Vista, and you know the guys who run the cafe and who own the land.
Yeah.
They're very much involved with all the different UFO people, and there's like hundreds coming each year to witness the lights in the desert. There is very strong reason to believe that we are very close to have an enormous contact.
Okay. Well, let me just say, thank you for that. It really helps me, a ragtag, long-haired, derelict shock poet. For me to say that is one thing. For an academic like yourself, and a highly respected professor, it's another thing. Now, that's why I chose Bakalar Laguna, because when I was first drawn there in 2021, my compulsion followed me getting into the water and getting out of it. So the download, I don't use that term ever, but whatever happened, getting into the water and getting out again, for me was so transformative that I knew through body resonance that I'd arrived at ground zero, and that the event horizon, which I call the New Earth Horizon, which is why the umbrella website for all of my initiatives and organizations is www.newearthhorizon.com. It's the kind of holding station for my life's work. But the New Earth Horizon, the event horizon, which is coming, which demarcates the line in the sand between the arcane metric of Saturnian and Luciferian false light, the false light matrix, and the emergent, let's call it early onset fifth dimensional ascension spiral, blah, blah, blah. We all know what I'm talking about. The line in the sand has to be a vector in time space. And the vector that I discovered, and I'm sure it's in multiple locations, but for sure in Bakalar Laguna is one of the vectors. And that's why I travel constantly all around the world, constantly. So for me to say, okay, this is where we're going to create ground zero for the actual manifestation of the new earth metric, of this elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness, this hereditary redemption, all the work we do. So for you to corroborate that from a scientific perspective is of huge consequence to me and to the team. So I thank you for that. But I will also say this, that when I was last there, and I've been away for a few months, I'll be back very, very soon. But when I was last there at our base where you're sitting right now on the banks of the Bakalar Laguna, I did go down to our land on the shoreline with two of the most respected shaman in Mexico, both of whom you know as well, because I made the introduction and you've had some extraordinary experiences with them. And I then introduced, well, we took them to the zone of silence following you. So many of our audience will have seen that extraordinary day on the 8th of April this year, which was in a sense the epicenter of the genesis point of the new dreaming of humanity. And we were there under central sun, under the total eclipse of the sun on that day, which was the first moment of atonement for all of humanity. And we were in the epicenter in that zone of silence in Mexico, which is like the Area 51 of Central America. And your work increasingly has been around the divinations of this new emergence, this new becoming, this new revelation for humanity. So it's a hard language to put into words or into science. You're doing it in science, and I'm doing it by rabble-rousing, people and getting them stimulated into these abstract ideas. But we're speaking the same language. And those two shaman that came to the zone of silence with us also came to Bakalar, and they conducted the ceremony on our land, on the banks of the Laguna, the last time I was there, Alex. And what they told me when they went into, the main female went into trance, who and extraordinary oracle. And she consulted with the spirits of the guardian, or the custodians, the guardians of the jungle, forgive me, the guardians of the jungle, and the guardians of the air, the guardians of the soil. And they appeared to her. I was sitting there. I was asked to witness this. And my sister was there. And the main shaman was there. And she, the oracle, was receiving the counsel from the air, from the elements. And they appeared. And she was in full conversation with these spirit forms. And the shaman was translating to me and my sister what was being said. Very coherent conversation taking place between these guardian spirits and elemental spirits and the clairvoyant. And at a given point, the shaman said to us, well, hang about. She's asking these guardian spirits if it may be possible that they would invite the spirit of the Laguna into this Congress. Is that possible? And the shaman told us it is possible, and they're answering yes, they're going to consult her, which they did. So the guardian spirits were consulting the spirit of the Laguna. And about 9 minutes later, something like that, the clairvoyant turned around towards the Laguna with her back to the water, turned around, looked up, and exclaimed in Spanish, which was translated to us by the shaman. She exclaimed that the spirit of the Laguna had agreed, consented, and she was coming on shore. And she proceeded to have a conversation with that spirit of the Laguna, which was a feminine presence, from what we understood, very, very tall, and very benevolent, very benign. And that spirit of the Laguna made it crystal clear that this place where we determined the new Earth, the shores of the new Earth location, the seed project, would be Genesis point in that part of the world for first contact, first group contact, collective contact. Not, many shamans see ETs. I've seen hundreds of UFO craft and what have you. And I've also had my engagements with so-called non-terrestrials. And I've spoken a bit about that on here. But when we talk about group contact, that's when it gets very exciting. And that's what you're referring to. That's the event horizon that is coming. It's when the star nations, the benevolent, the benign star nations reconvene with us. Their progeny in a way. We are the progeny in a way, but we are also the point of absolution and redemption for them back to source. So that's a much bigger story, which we can't get into right now. But just wanted to underscore and corroborate what you just said, Alex, that the spirit of the Laguna, of the Bakalar Laguna, confirmed to me through the clairvoyance and the shaman, highly respected people, that indeed first contact would be happening. And Bakalar Laguna was absolutely one of the prime portals on Earth. So I thank you so very much for this. How do you want to pursue or follow this story moving forward as it relates to Bakalar being one of the prime portals?
Well, I'm working at the minute on a more clearer conversation, and water is really the key to that. I have to make that very clear. Some of the water sources have more information than others. It depends how pure the water sources are, and that's why I'm concentrating on the lagunas and also on the cenotes, which are usually around or within the lagunas anyway. So I have taken also different samples from different areas of Bakalar, of the Laguna. I can tell you that your position where the seed is the only position where I got the clearest conversations and connection of all of the lagoon. So there is something about this specific area where the seed is, which aligns for some reason with the most corresponding point. So which is very interesting. But the water is the key. I would go so far to say that water is probably as close to an extraterrestrial being as you can get.
Okay.
I think totally misunderstanding a lot of the information, and I think it's in the water.
Thank you. Just in closing, Alex, because the segment we recorded earlier is going to be playing on shortly, but it just occurred to me that you're so right, of course, what you're saying. Water is the quantum carrier. We're looking at a dozen different pieces of land in Tennessee because we're making our determination over the next couple of weeks about the piece of land that we're going to close on and purchase as we begin this golden ticket project, which is to create the first full-fledged micronation in the heartland of America. And then begin the whole bleaching of the soil and the purifying of the soil as we cleanse it from the federal liens and the Vatican liens and the contracts with all of these, false powers and war powers. So our law commission are going to begin that process. It's going to take 3 or 4 months. And then once we have removed all of the indentureship and the encumbrances of that soil, taking the land in that Tennessee land, we'll be taking it back to the original land patents of the Native Americans. In this case, it's the Cherokee Nation, who named that part of the world Tennessee, which became Tennessee. So we'll be bringing in the Hopi and the Cherokee and Eagle and Condor and the other Seminole First Nation peoples. Thank you, Christy, for putting up this golden ticket banner. So anyone listening to this can go right now to newearthgoldenticket.com. So Alex, we've begun a fire sale of 1,000 golden tickets at $10,000 each in order to create the treasury to make the acquisition of the land. We've already got money and we're going to be making that acquisition, but there's still spots for people to buy. They become the pioneers, the mothers and fathers of the new nation. So it's a membership to this new micronation, and it secures their spot in terms of getting a plot of land and then building a home in this community, which is going to have the New Earth University as well, twinned with the one we're building in Mexico, the Regenesis Clinic and Spa Retreat Centers and all of that stuff, and all of our beautiful bioresonance and bioarchitecture. Point I'm making here, Alex, is setting up this full-fledged sovereign auto-determining micronation powered up by all of our breakthrough technologies and blah, blah, blah is one thing. But I don't want to really choose the land until you've checked the water. So all of the land holdings that we're looking at right now are variously have rivers and brooks and lakes and ponds. So is it simply a matter of our land scouts in Tennessee getting a file of water for you in a glass container and then getting it to you? Is it that simple? And then you can check the readings of the water?
The best results I have, to be honest, is if there is very little time in between collecting the water and analyzing the water. You do lose some of the blueprint the longer the water maintains locked up in a vial. So it's really essential that you do this as quickly as possible. Sometimes 24 hours is okay, but we're trying to encourage people who are sending in also different water samples to us to do that, to have no delays by shipping it over. And also, of course, one of the biggest problems we have is if we send it over the border, it will be radiated. So that is the biggest problem.
That's a terrible thing. So how can we get any kind of reading on the water just to make a determination about which one is preferable out of those dozen or so bits of land that we're looking at?
Yes. Unless I have the time and come over and do it myself. So I think we need to find a way of.
Let's look at that. Let's have that conversation, Alex. I'll give you a call over the next couple of days, and let's look at that possibly, because I think that you're so right about water being the cornerstone of everything, and I want to get that piece right. And just so you know, Mary, the very brilliant Mary Costello, beloved friend, and she's featured on the Lazarus Symposium before. our beautiful druidess in Ireland says that she feels the first contact will be Andromedan. I rather suspect she may be right about that. But look, I'm 10 minutes over time. I can see Christy wagging her finger almost at me in the green room. So, Alex, just want to thank you so much for coming on at such short notice, just to add a bit of spark to this introduction segment. And people, stand by, please. Let me just check the slides here. Alex, so next we've got coming up, well, we've got Beyond Your Body, Initializing Astral Flight with the very brilliant Darius J. Wright. And then we have AKASHIC Wisdom Chronicles, How Humanity Won the War, with our galactic historian Dave Emery and Jane Evershed. And then we have Activating Gaia's Womb, the Mystical Pulse of Water, with Dr. Alex Ling here. And then finally, we've got the Confessions of an Illuminati, Part 2, with the former highest ranking Vatican Freemason, or he's from that line of the Black nobility, Leo Sagami, who's a turncoat, a whistleblower in that sense, and living now actually exiled from Italy, living now in exile in the United States. He was given a very special dispensation by the State Department to live in the United States. They want him very dead in Italy for dishing the dirt on the Vatican, the Black nobility, and for turning against his blood contracts. A fascinating guy, beloved friend of mine for many years. And actually, Alex, I'm assuming you've not met Leo Zagami yet, but I tell you what, Christy, if you're there, that's going to be a hell of a conversation. Would you be down for that, Alex?
Totally. Yes, absolutely. The more we can expose, the better.
Perfect. Alex, thanks so much, brother. And I'll give you a call privately over the next 2 days.
Okay. Thanks for having me on such a
All right, brother. Thank you so much. Okay, friends, I'm just going to quickly honor you with glancing at a handful of these questions that came through. Can you measure the frequencies of these harmonics in the ancient structures, such as the Giza pyramid? The short answer to that question is yes. And you'll stand by for the book that we're putting out. And I'm hoping, Christy, we can speak to the publisher, who's a beloved friend of mine, and to Claire Harvey, and try and find out what the timeline looks for the release of this book, so that we could maybe have a segment on Lazarus with David Sereda and others who are contributing to that book as a countdown event would be great. Laura Ann's asking, hi from Slovenia, near Bosnian pyramids. That's with our friend, Dr. Sam, who we need to bring on to Lazarus, incidentally, Christy. We've got to bring Dr. Sam on to Lazarus. We've got to do it. I wish you, Sasha, would visit them because they're truly incredible. Well, look, I've been meaning to, and I've told Dr. Sam I'll come out there to Bosnia. Let me see if I can arrange that. Okay, I'm going to think about that seriously on my journey. I may be going to Romania next month, and if I do, maybe I'll bomb over and spend a couple of days with Dr. Sam. And I'm seeing Michael Tellinger next week here in Southern Africa. I'll be with him for a couple of days. So he's very close to Sam. I'll call Dr. Sam when I'm with Michael and arrange that. Thank you for the prompt. Aranka saying, is there a map showing all intersection points? Aranka, yes, and you really want to chase down the work of Jimmy Blanchette here, because Jimmy, and certainly in the book, the Great Pyramid book that we're going to be doing, you're going to have the definitive charts of all of these intersections of all of the song lines and the ley lines and the prime meridians and sacred sites and so on. And my beloved Dara Akasha is asking, the hologram can be flat or spherical when viewed from various perspectives. Yes, indeed. You're absolutely bang on there, Dara. And Aranka is asking, what's Saturn's role in all of this energy? That's a whole segment on Lazarus, which I think we should do. And we've done it before. We've really focused on Saturn before, didn't we, Christy? Christy, forgive me. I'm going to bring you in. Do you mind if I do that? I just want to bring you in. We did a piece on Saturn, didn't we? A segment just on Saturn at some point.
Well, I think it was with Greg. Oh gosh, it was like Charlie and Greg, and it was the hyper dimensional physics. That
Yes.
I think it was actually that one, and we just ended up talking a lot about Saturn. It wasn't necessarily focused.
Okay. Well, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to just focus one segment on Saturn, just on Saturn, and really nail this one down. But I think we could do it on Saturn, on Mars, on the planets on the inner solar system. We could do them all. I did this on Vibrational Revelations with Elena Bensonoff and Alejandro Ferradas a couple, 3 or 4 years ago. But I would love to do it from more of a physics perspective. We could be led by David Sereda on this. Love to bring in Dan, Shanaz, Brooks, Charlie. Maybe we just have a real gangbang. Also, Jimmy Blanchette, who's now going to be a favorite on after this latest presentation, and Charlie Ziese. And maybe we do that. We do all the planets on the inner solar system, but we script this and work out definitively what the fuck is Mars? What is it? What is Mars as an archetype, as a presence, as an element, as a vector? What is Saturn? What is Jupiter? What is the moon? What is the sun? I think we should really do that. That should be a big gangbang panel, and definitively we should nail that down. So thank you for that question, Aranka, because we're going to take your question forward. And no, we won't be paying you any royalties, because I'll make out that was my idea, not yours. And Marie Espinosa is asking, by extrapolation, are we also part of the golden ratio? Short answer, darling girl, is yes, yes, and yes. It is. We are, without any question of doubt. Polly Waffle, great name. Explain the firmament, please. No, you explain it, Polly Waffle. Joe Llewellyn, Sasha, you need to get Peter Tulton on regarding calling ships in. Done deal. That's the kind of feedback we need. Christy, I can just see, is writing down that name as we speak, so that she can reach out.
I actually already Googled it, but I wasn't sure which one it was.
Oh, okay. Peter Talton. Well, I can run some searches as well. And the last comment, of course, is from Mary Costello, saying that she feels the first concept will be Andromedan friends. I think that brings us to the end of our open bonus segment to this, the 39th Lazarus Symposium. I'm going to retire. It's 20 past. I don't even know how to read clocks, so I don't know why I'm looking. I can just see it's 17, which means it must be approaching 20. My mum's here with me in the Cape. We're going to have rooibos tea with lashings of cream and honey before getting ready for bed. So I'm going to bid you adieu. I'm going to be monitoring the rest of the symposium from under 2 duvets. So I will be present. And if needs be, I'll jump on, but only if it's a crisis. Christy, thanks for everything, darling. And I'm going to bid adieu to my loving audience and leave you to take over. You can stick up the next slide now. Friends, thanks for joining me tonight, and enjoy the rest of the show. Darius J. Wright, who's a pioneering spiritual guide acclaimed for his expert. What a Freudian slip is that? His expert exploration of out-of-body experiences, passionately mapping the nature of our reality. Now, Darius ventures into mystical realms such as the halls of Amenti, which we touched on with Dave Emery in the last Lazarus Symposium. The heavenly realm, the angelic realm, the realm of Eden, and the realm of the ancients. Remarkably, he transcends our temporal universe, offering a perspective akin to receiving reality from what science might describe as God's point of view. So Darius has developed the AIDA, or AYDA method, which is a revolutionary approach that empowers individuals to unlock their dormant abilities and explore unseen dimensions. And his numerous personal out-of-body experiences challenge conventional spiritual beliefs and unravel profound truths about reality's constructs and the soul's true nature. Now, committed to awakening humanity, Darius invites us to look deeper into his transformative insights. And you can check his extraordinary work out at DariusJWright.com, and that's right with a W at the front, friends. Darius, very happy to meet you. Thank you for joining us on Lazarus.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sasha. I appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction too. So that was
Very
yeah.
good, very good. So when you sit next to someone on a plane or get asked what it is that you do vocationally, how do you